Welcome and good afternoon to Wejo's Big Mobility Data webinar. We're very excited to have you here today. And in the next hour, together with my colleague, Daniel Tibble, we're going to talk to you about the exciting world of connected vehicle data and about how to use and gain maximum benefit from big mobility data. So together, Daniel Tibble and I will be talking to you about the world of big data in the connected vehicle and mobility sector. And we will have some polling questions throughout the course of the presentation, and we'll be giving you the opportunity to ask questions throughout. So you can feel free to submit your questions at any time during the webinar, and we will receive them. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end where we will answer your questions and hopefully lead on into the rest of the subjects. So without further ado, let me just jump ahead. Apologize for this. We're having, I think, some lag in the network today. The slides are advancing here, but they don't seem to be advancing on the screen. There we go. So we're going to talk about two things today before the Q&A section. So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to Wejo, who we are, what we do, and then Daniel Tibble is going to talk about 3 benefits of connected vehicle data, a couple of case studies, and most importantly, we're going to talk about big data, big mobility data, how to use it, how to process it, how it can enhance your businesses, and how it is superior and an upgrade from other sources of data that are available in the marketplace today. Next slide. So Wejo is a connected vehicle data ecosystem. We partner with global automotive manufacturers to create mobility intelligence that revolutionizes the way we live, work, and travel. So what does that mean? Wejo helps to connect data providers and data users to maximize the value in the form of mobility intelligence from the data that comes from the millions of connected vehicles that are moving around the globe, actually. Next slide, Dan. So just to give you a picture to keep in mind as we talk through connected vehicle data and how Wejo processes and what Wejo does. This is a view that shows on the left side, the connected car. Connected cars, as I think we all know, connect or create a tremendous amount of data through the advanced technologies. And that's only going to continue increasing as we move forward with the evolution of mobility and autonomous, electrified, and assisted driver systems. The data that comes from those vehicles, as well as other data providers, whether that be third-party service providers, telematics services providers, fleet management companies, can all be collected and ingested into the Wejo platform. Now, keep in mind, all that data is different. It is unique in many cases to the vehicles on which it was created. So Wejo is ingesting very different forms of data and combining it into a common data model from which the insights and mobility intelligence that we create can be derived. Most important thing about Wejo is the security and regulatory wrapper. That means that the data that is within the Wejo platform is 100% secure and private and managed in such a way that both data providers and data users can be comfortable that all of the appropriate consents have been obtained for use and sharing of the data, and that the data is fully secure at all times. Within the Wejo platform, once we have the data into a common data structure, we're able to apply very sophisticated data science and analytics tools to create mobility intelligence products that we can offer to a variety of marketplaces and a variety of users through a number of different forms. So those forms include streaming, actually live, highly granular, detailed raw data in very high volume with low latency. It can include batch data that is provided less frequently, but with the same degree of precision and information contained in it, as well as intelligence products, which don't necessarily deliver billions of data points, but provide the same underlying information from those data points that would be valuable in both public and private sector businesses and entities. We also offer a Wejo Studio and various other developer portals through which the data can be accessed and utilized in your businesses. Next slide, Dan. So Wejo is a company that's been around for many years now, and we have built the largest and most expansive platform for the management of connected vehicle data. And today, the Wejo platform is managing the largest stream of high resolution connected vehicle data in the world. Some big numbers here. We don't have to talk about them all, but there are 10.6 million live vehicles providing data to the Wejo platform today. That equals 8.6 trillion data points ingested and 336 billion miles of data that have been curated. We've got 5 petabytes of data ingested, 42 billion journeys, and that's about 58 million journeys per day of data coming off of connected vehicles. This is a tremendous data asset, which is what gives power to the big data that we talk about and the ability to extract very detailed insights and very sophisticated analysis from this tremendous data asset. Next slide. So processing big data is complex, but it's very important that as vehicles become more complex, as mobility solutions become more complex, that we have the ability to utilize the state-of-the-art data and analysis systems to be able to gain the insights that we need to improve the way that we live, work, and travel. And so over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, Dan is going to talk about how we do that, how we manage the data, how we can use it, and show you some ways in which we have already used it through case studies to give you ideas on how perhaps you could use the data in your businesses. We're also going to discuss the benefits of big data versus some of the current data sources and how this really is the future of data analysis. So Dan, next slide. As we know, consumers have very high expectations and they're only growing. In the mobility sector, they want better mobility options, they want more economic value, but that provides and presents challenges to the public sector. So we know that we have 1.3 million deaths caused by crashes globally. That's a terrible statistic, and through the use of connected vehicle data and big data mobility intelligence, we can make roads safer, we can improve traffic flow, and we can help to eliminate those deaths caused by the crashes that are as a result of crowded highways. Also, New Yorkers, for example, spend 107 hours per year looking for parking. There are solutions which can be powered by this data that can make that a much more pleasant experience. In the private sector, there's recent studies say that $88 billion is wasted annually in the United States due to traffic and congestion, and $112 billion is spent on road building and improvement. That's a tremendous investment in our infrastructure, and it's important that we be building roads most efficiently and locating parking and businesses in ways that maximize the efficiency of the network and provide people and businesses with the greatest economic value, the most efficient use of their time and energy. Next slide. So today, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, we use more traditional and perhaps less sophisticated systems to capture data about mobility, about where people drive, perhaps when they drive, how they drive, things like rumble strips and manual traffic counts, traffic cameras, mobile device tracking. These have all been utilized effectively, certainly in many ways, but with the explosion of technology and data and mobility solutions and customer expectations, we feel there's a need to evolve to the next level of technology in collecting data for guiding the decisions and the investments that we make. Next slide. These traditional sources as they exist today can be difficult to manage. They come from many disparate sources. They can be low volume, poor quality. have inconsistent elements in them, and subject to rising costs. We talked about at the beginning, Wejo ingests data from the highest technology vehicles on the road at very high frequency, very high speed, with very low delivery latency to the end users. We make it common, we make it consistent, we ensure that it's very high quality. And so, we are providing a solution that's keeping pace with the technology in the industry today, while eliminating many of the traditional challenges that both public and private sector entities have faced in the past in trying to utilize data and mobility data and vehicle data to inform the decisions that they make in their businesses. Next slide. So the question is, how can big mobility data support the challenges that you face in your businesses? How can it help you to have better data accuracy? How can it help you to use data more effectively and to have a better return on investment for the money that you spend on acquiring data, analyzing data, and utilizing data in your businesses? Daniel is going to speak about those over the course of the next slides. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session with your questions collected. We'll read them out, and either Dan or I will answer them. And hopefully this is going to be very informative, but please do raise your questions throughout the course of this, and we will attempt to answer every one of them. If we don't get to all of them, we can certainly follow up and provide answers at a later time. Before we do that, we do want to ask one question, just as to sort of set the baseline and better understand where everybody's coming from. So you should see the ability to vote on this question on your screen. If you could just take a second to click whichever number best represents your company's data processing capabilities, with 1 meaning you have no capabilities today to ingest or process connected vehicle data, and 5 meaning that you have an infrastructure and the capability to process billions of data points of raw data from connected vehicles. So we'll pause just for a second on that and see the results tabulate. And while we're doing that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Daniel Tibble, who will take you through some very interesting information and examples on connected vehicle data and managing big data in the mobility sector. Daniel?
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Tibble. I'm the Director of Data Science here at Wejo. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about big data and how it can be used by organizations in lots of different ways. But first of all, I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction to what big data is. What do we mean by big data? Because we hear this word all the time. Now, big data is characterized not just by the size and volume, but it's usually data that's collected as part of a process. So we're not explicitly going out and collecting these data items because of the technology improvements that we see every day in vehicles, in houses, in Internet of Things. It means we're able to connect the data and collect the data almost incidentally to the process. What this means is we get a much different type of accuracy in big data. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an example. So we just asked you a question. Now we've gone out there and we've asked you this polling question, which people have responded to. We've been able to collect that data, but actually, we've only been able to collect it amongst the attendees here. It's a very limited data set that we've got there. Another way of assessing a company's data processing capabilities using big data might be looking at website visits or looking at social media to see, do you have data scientists working for your company? Do you have data engineers? By doing that, we're able to survey a much larger volume of people and get a much richer insight, but it's a different type of accuracy. It gives us much richer insight, but in a slightly different way to actually asking someone a physical question. So I'm going to talk about a case study that we've done in Wejo. So quick service restaurants, drive-ins, as we tend to refer to them in the UK, very popular over COVID. I'm sure that's been the same over in the US. Now, these organizations, these companies are using data sources. They're using, a huge amount of data sources. How does connected vehicle data differ in the big data space? Well, connected vehicle data is it's collecting the data from the vehicles as it drives around. We're not going out and surveying people. We're not counting people who walk through the door. We're able to see the vehicles driving around, collect the data, and create new insights because of it. Now, a great example of this is what you're looking at here. So this is using connected vehicle data and a machine learning algorithm put over the top to identify car parks. Now, that might seem like a very simple thing, but actually, if you want to know, how many visitors drive into your car park, identifying the car parks is actually quite difficult. There's lots of different methods to do it using old data methods. You could draw a big circle around the point of interest. You could sit out front and you could count cars, or you could manually draw a polygon, as we call them, around the car parking space. But actually, you're gonna miss a lot. But what better way of identifying where the car parks are by just looking at where the cars park? And that might sound a little bit, simplistic, but actually, this is using big data and the interactions of those vehicles with a physical space and a little bit of machine learning on top to understand something about the environment. And what that means is in the connected vehicle space, we can give much more accurate reporting and insight around what those vehicles have done in that space. So as we can see here, we've got a different version of accuracy here. So it's not just about, the vehicle, the footfall. We're actually able to plot the context of the vehicle journey, the customer journey, as it's called. So it's not just about, a vehicle moving into a car park. What did it do before? What did it do afterwards? Did it park? Did it just drive through? We can see much more context because we're using a big data solution using connected vehicle data. And what can we do with that? Well, we can draw insights. This is very simple footfall location analysis here, just looking at two restaurants, a McDonald's and a Wendy's. And we can see here the McDonald's has got much higher footfall, much higher visits there. But what we've been able to do using the context and of the big data source is not just did someone visit the McDonald's or the Wendy's, but was it part of a round trip? So did someone go from, the same start place to the Wendy's, then back again? Was the visit specifically around getting food? And that's context that, using small data sources, you could survey customers, but that's very slow, very expensive. Using big data, we're collecting this all the time. And actually what we see is the balance is about right. So McDonald's and Wendy's don't have a different visit rate in terms of round trips to each other, but we were able to see that through the big data. And we can look at it not just a brand level, we could look at it at zip code level, location level, county level, state level, and so on and so forth. Because we're collecting this data via connected vehicles, we can very quickly scale it up, both geographically and over a period of time. Similarly, we're just doing some zip code analysis here. So we're looking at the proportion. It's market share. So visits to McDonald's versus Wendy's. And you can see, it's about 80-20. So McDonald's is by far and away the most popular. 80% of journeys were to McDonald's versus 21% to Wendy's. But it does vary quite a bit by zip code. Some actually, Wendy's has got more market share than McDonald's. And this is, again, using connected vehicle data can very easily scale to do this sort of analysis. So, we've shown a couple of use cases there. We focused on the fast food restaurant, and you can obviously think about the applications in retail and entertainment, but also in real estate. If you're planning, an investment, if you're planning, a new build, be it a new shopping mall, be it, mixed use development, or you're just trying to get a sense of the value of the land using connected vehicle data and other big data sources. You can do this with a lot more insight than going out and doing expensive market surveys, looking at out-of-date data that might be 2, 3, 4, even 5 years old. And certainly, City and Department of Transport planning, we do speak to a lot of cities and Department of Transport. And what we hear a lot is that, they really need to understand for their modeling and their planning, what are the behaviors, not just, where do people drive, but how do they drive there, what times of day, how does it vary from hour of day to hour of day, day of week, and so on and so forth. And obviously, over COVID, we've seen some very, very big shifts in driver behaviors. Because we're collecting this data all the time, because connected vehicles are, we're storing this data, it means we can really easily do that reporting and that insight. Going to talk a bit now about effectiveness. So, data effectiveness, it's not now these days just about efficiencies. It's not just about reducing, the amount of congestion. Cities, Department of Transports, smart cities, they need to really optimize the city for quality of life measures. It's not, like I say, it's not just about, a very simple one measure reduction. We're able to look at the balancing of those measures on each other. So, you might reduce journey times from one part of the city to another, but has that as an adverse impact on another part of the city? Has that increased the number of vehicle miles in a zip code that's down the road? And again, big data allows you to model all of this. So going to look at a very simple impact operational issue that was on a particular interstate in Texas. Now, just looking at average speed here, you can see very clearly, we're looking at a week on week and a day on day comparison. So on the left, we're looking at the week before. The middle one is the day before, and then the one on the right is actually, there was a quite significant incident on that roadway. So what we're able to do using connected vehicle data is not just look at the average speed. I'm fairly sure that there'd be hardware on this interstate at least at one point within the couple of mile stretch to measure average speed. And there was an incident on that day, so obviously average speed is gonna drop. But what we can see is really granularly where it dropped. There's some areas that was very badly affected, but more importantly, we're able to look at the surrounding roads. So if you look at the one on the right there, not only did we see the main road, the main interstate there was significantly slower, we also seen quite a significant impact on the surrounding neighborhoods. And that's the quality of life measure I was talking about before. That's the vehicle miles that are now in a neighborhood that wouldn't be there. Slow moving vehicles that are, harming the air quality in those areas. And you can see this really clearly here. So, we've just zoomed out a bit again. We don't rely on side of road implementations here. They're expensive to implement, so you don't get full coverage. Because we're tracking connected vehicles, just as they're driving around, we're collecting this data already. And what we're able to do here is just look at the impact that the road closure. This is looking at journey volumes, so not average speed here, but journey volumes. And you can see left to right, the journey volumes on the right there, that diversion route there, and actually the one just below it, have been massively impacted on the day. And this is again something that is used not just for traffic planning, but operational planning. You're dealing with a fluid situation on the roads day in, day out. So in terms of benefits, transportation planning, I've talked a lot about there. Cities and departments of transports, again, it's about balancing. It's not just about what's the impact on a specific road. It's about, has it increased the harsh braking events in, a different area? We've used this data a lot to look at how lockdown restrictions have impacted the way that people, live, work and travel. And I think we all know that the commute, the daily commute is a very different thing at the moment. I think we're seeing about 12% drop in journeys across the board, but actually on some routes, the number of journeys has gone up. Sometimes a day, actually, we're seeing that the number of journeys has gone up, but actually that peak rush hour has very much gone down. And using old methods of, data collection and modeling, you've got maybe a 5-year turnaround in collecting these, but big data allows you to, take this data and really quickly, effectively do the analysis. And logistics and fleets, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the next section, but obviously they're big users of the road network, and being able to really quickly react to incidents and change the routes that the vehicles are on is going to really drive efficiencies and effectiveness of those businesses. And now we go into data investment. So depending on what sort of organization you work for, you might have already made investments to to start collecting data. And as I said at the beginning, the difference with big data is being collected incidentally to a process. So actually the investment to then get that data is, it's actually reduced because the data is already collected. We've got data lakes filling up with this data. We're actually now, taking that data and making use of it. So a good example that we've seen time and time again is COVID analysis. So, no one knew COVID was going to hit, and no one knew the impact it was going to have. No one knew how quickly it was going to hit, and no one knew how long it's going to take to recover. And we still don't know that. But what we're able to do with big data, we didn't need to plan for COVID. What we're able to do is the data, because the data was already being collected into a data lake. We already had the data to start doing the analysis. So very simple chart here. We're looking at journeys and journeys to supermarket, and the red line is the 16th of March, and just over 12 months ago, we all know what happened there. People changed behaviors because of COVID. And what you can see is, the journeys by time of day. As I mentioned before, rush hour was gone. We're still seeing cars on the road, but actually, this was right at the peak of lockdown. Just as things were, workplaces were sending home and people were being told to stay at home and so on and so forth. But there's just a really big, obvious impact there on lockdown. But then on the right, we see something slightly different. So this is people driving to a supermarket. So journeys to a supermarket actually increased, and they increased early. That was something that was very, very clear when we looked at this. It increased early, and what was happening there, that was people stockpiling. If you cast your mind back, I don't know if you all engaged in it. I certainly engaged in a little bit of, not so much stockpiling, but I knew I needed food, and I didn't know I was going to be able to get to the supermarket and there was going to be food on the shelves. So I tended to go, and people tended to go early, and it's really clear what we started seeing. But again, we weren't having to react and send people onto the streets or to go out and install devices. We're collecting this data, so it means we can just do the analysis as needed. And here's, a bit more detail around some of the changes we saw. So it's not just about, people going to supermarkets. There was a big shift in people going to, we call it do-it-yourself stores, but home stores where you buy your tools, you buy your, the stuff for your house, so you can, I'm not quite sure particularly why there was a big shift in that, but certainly something we saw in the UK as well. Department stores and convenience stores, we know people were wanting to go to there to do the last minute shopping, but actually we saw a really big tail off, particularly the malls. Malls were really badly hit by COVID, and you can see by the 22nd of March, they'd seen a 70% drop in visits, which is, really, really significant. And I think we all know it's going to take, quite a big recovery for that. But what we do know is the recovery is going to be data driven. Again, a bit more year-on-year comparison now. So, what we're able to do with big data, because the data is filling up our data lake, because we're collecting this data and we're analyzing it, and we're able to produce insights. What we could do is, we saw the immediate impact. We were seeing the hour-on-hour impact. What we're able to do now is look back a year, and this is really important for strategic planning, because the strategy now post-COVID, the organizations that you all working in, you'll all be implementing a post-COVID strategy. Well, how can you do that without data? Because you need to know what the change has been, not just what you're seeing on the ground, but actually what your competitors are seeing, and what the context of the world is around you now. The old models are broken. We've got new data, not just new data sources, but the data is very different now. And you can see the changes here. It's not just as simple as saying we're seeing a 12% drop here. We're seeing a 63% drop in commutes. I think this was in a specific city region. That's not across the board. But actually, grocery, we're still seeing a drop in journeys, but it's nowhere near as bad. Education has still dropped, but it's around 15% in this specific case study that we looked at here. But again, we're able to model this. We don't have to go out and install devices in every one of these institutions. We don't have to do surveys. We've got the data, and we're able to look at the context of what's happening, in the world that we live in. So the benefits from that, it's really wide. Now, the big one for the strategic investment is that we've got almost 2 years of data now in connected vehicle data in Wejo. We can look at seasonality, we can look at before and after, and we can look at actually the trends that we've seen since the restrictions have started lifting, and we can start looking at predicting and forecasting on what's the bigger picture, what's going to happen there. And that goes across the board, retail, real estate, and departments of transports. And these are really big areas where you can utilize these big data sources to really change how you plan, how you forecast, how you decision make. Going to ask another poll here. Now, what we're interested in here is how interested are you in connected vehicle data? You know, is it something that you're already invested in? Is it something you're already using? Is it something that actually, you know, you've looked at and you're not interested in? So there should be a poll that's popped up now. And if you could just, you know, if you could give us the answers there, because really, really interesting for us and really interesting for us to learn as well.
There may be a problem with the poll on Zoom. For some reason, it doesn't seem to be appearing. So if you want to answer that, please please just put your answer into chat, and we'll compile those manually offline.
Thanks for that, Joe. So I hope that's been interesting for you in terms of the case studies and, you know, what big data is and how it works, you know, in relation to other data sources and actually where it adds the most value. I'm just going to, do you want me to talk through these slides now, Joe, and then we'll do the Q&A at the end, or do you want me to hand over to you?
No, that would be fine. Go ahead, just finish up with your material.
So we've got a number of ways of accessing Wejo connected vehicle data. Now, we've talked a bit about the size of our data. You know, the numbers are mind-boggling, and you know, it's our biggest asset, but it's also our biggest challenge, because a lot of organizations we work with, you know, they're not ready, or they're not able to ingest and, you know, derive the insights for that sort of data. So what we've done at Wejo is we've developed a wide suite of products which allow us to get the insights into the hands of different organizations that are at different levels of sophistication. You know, the days are gone. You don't need a huge data science team now to be able to deal with this big data. What we've done at Wejo is we've taken it from, you know, the big stream, which is, you know, up to 18 billion data points a day we've seen. Obviously, you know, that needs a big investment. You've then got to derive it. You've got to deal with it. But actually, you know, we can then take it down into consumable data sources. You know, we're able to move our data in much more customized, you know, standardized data feeds that can integrate with desktop tools that you might be using already. So Tableau, Power BI, Excel. You know, we've delivered data insights via email. So it really is, you know, it's not about, you know, these big data texts anymore. We're able to take the big data and make it consumable in the desktop tools and the, you know, the technologies that you're used to working with. And also, you know, we've got self-serve data. We've got a developer environment which you know, allows people to go in and build their own queries and engage with Wejo data without having to invest in that platform. You know, we've got the platform that people can log on to and use to be able to get these insights. And we've also got, you know, a Wejo Studio offering, which is, it's really just a self-serve way of just going in and, you know, getting the insights that you need. So, you know, don't think because we're talking about big data, it needs big data investment. You know, Wejo, we're offering solutions, you know, to do the heavy lifting for you. And then we're just going to finish off, and I can see there's been a few questions popped into the Q&A, but please, you know, now's your chance. We really love getting the feedback from you guys. You know, what is it that we've covered today that you want to know more about? You know, what didn't we cover that you might want to know about? You know, if you just want to fire them in there, we'll just give it a couple. I think there's a couple already been answered. And then we'll just ask some questions here. So.
Yes. Yeah, Dan, I can take those. We've got a couple questions I'll start with, and feel free to keep sending them in, and we'll hopefully get through all of them. So the first question is, how are you handling data privacy issues? If you're able to capture individual journeys to and from homes, it seems you can identify individuals. Great question. And there's probably multiple answers I can give you that all sort of fit together. First of all, the foundation of Wejo's business is trust and privacy. We are all very sensitive to the privacy of our data in whatever forum we share data. And so, you know, all of the data that Wejo receives has been given proper consent for sharing and for the use cases and purposes that we're sharing. The data is highly secure and managed privately within the Wejo environment. And we built the platform on the basis of the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. And we have adapted it to include all of the emerging legislation really worldwide about data privacy. So the California consumer privacy legislation that has probably led the way in the United States, we're fully compliant with that. And we continually scan all of the legislation around the world to make sure that all of the ways in which we handle data, and it can get very complex. So whether, how data is shared, whether it's anonymized or aggregated, whether it's de-identified, whether it's re-identifiable, those are all very specific details that we need to manage both on the data input side and on the data output side. And that's really the essence of what the Wejo Adept platform does. You saw a box on that graphic I showed earlier called consent management. That is ensuring and managing the consent to use the data for the designated purposes. As far as location, yes, there can be sort of inadvertent identification of individual data subjects or locations. And so to the extent that that is a concern or a risk, we have filters and capabilities and techniques built into our Adept platform that we can anonymize or mask or blur location or location detail or precision at the beginnings and ends of journeys in areas that have generally lower population, on roadways that have limited traffic flow. And we can do that either on a geographic by distance basis, or we can do it on a time basis. So for example, we could truncate the location to 10 kilometers for the first few minutes of every drive in a sparsely populated area, so that you don't really know where a vehicle is originating or where it's ending its journey. There are also opportunities that we can just take it down to a zip code level, for example, in the US, and not necessarily show the detailed path of the entire journey. So many different methods of ensuring privacy and preventing against any abuse or misuse of the data that is delivered from the Wejo platform. Dan, is there anything else you would add to that?
No, just to reiterate, it's not that we don't reverse engineer it. We can't. It's actually the data we get. It's fully anonymous. There's no risk to privacy, and also we've got some quite sophisticated techniques for even reducing the risk further. I think, like Joe mentioned, I'm based in Europe, and we've had GDPR, which is very, very strict data privacy regulations. So it's part and parcel of who we are and what we do, because we're so used to be able to do this.
Right. Another question came in. How do you collect the data from the vehicles, and do you have worldwide data or just US? So Dan mentioned a couple times, this data is being collected anyway. So generally, all of the major vehicle manufacturers, all of the major brands have some sort of connected vehicle data services, consumer services program. Plus, they collect data for their own purposes, for product quality, warranty, analysis, customer relationship management. So there's a tremendous amount of data being collected on the vehicles and streamed into data clouds owned and managed and controlled by the vehicle manufacturers themselves. So Wejo is able to tie into those aggregated data sources and then ingest the data into our platform. And we can tap into, all of the major vehicle, connected vehicle data cloud platforms, around the world, and ingest that data. And as I said before, commonize it, standardize it, and be able to do analysis on it as a much larger combined data asset than any of the individuals. And yes, we have data around the world. So we have live partners, data providing partners with vehicle manufacturers and some other data providers who manage and operate connected services, connected data platforms. And we're receiving live data from locations around the world.
And I just want to add to that, the importance of the connected vehicle data, the fact that it's not aftermarket devices, it's not dongles. It means we've got a much more accurate data source there. So, what you tend to see with particularly dongles, they tend to be in, really low down, the very small devices. The GPS devices in these connected vehicle data are really powerful. They've got a huge battery connected to them, and the aerial is quite often, the windscreen surround. So, when it comes to GPS accuracy, it's phenomenally more accurate than mobile phones or aftermarket devices. But on top of that, the it's part of the vehicle. So it's not just about the location. It's about, the braking sensors, the engine temperature, whether the windscreen wipers are on or off. It's really important that the data that we're collecting, it's not just, where the vehicle is. That's a part of it, but actually really importantly is what's the vehicle doing, with all of the other sensors that are connected to it.
Right. Related to that question, Dan, are you using location data from mobile phones as well?
No. No, we're connected vehicle data. We've compared mobile data to Wejo data in a small way, and it just doesn't compare. For what you can do with connected vehicle data when you're trying to look at traffic and driver behaviors. So no, we don't use mobile phone data at all.
Okay. Another question, could I add my own POI or could I add my own in the analytics, for example?
Yeah, so Wejo data can be combined with whatever analytics platform that you're currently using, so you could do it within there. Within our, the developer labs, the sandbox environment I mentioned before, yes, you can upload POIs, and that's something that's particularly common. We're big users of OSM POIs, as I'm sure you all are, as well. But what we've got on top of that, and I think we touched on it a little bit in the McDonald's use case, is actually we've got our own unique set of POIs based on what's the point of interest that's important to the vehicle. You saw the clustering of the car parks, but what we can also do is we've got machine learning models that classify, not just the car park but the journey. So to give you a very simple example, well, if a vehicle pulls up and the fuel level increases, well, we know it's a fuel station. Because we can collect that off, a huge amount of vehicles on the roadways, we've got a very, very accurate record of where all the fueling stations are, and not just where the fueling stations are, but actually where the fuel pumps are. So we can then use that to distinguish people who drive to refuel and people who drive to the shop to buy a bag of crisps and a can of soda. So, yes, you can combine POI data. It's geospatial data at the end of the day, very simple to do. But also, we're also starting to build our own POI data set out of this big data source.
Thank you. And just a reminder, you can, I said to use the chat, you can also use the Q&A button to submit questions. I have them coming in on both channels. Another question from one of our attendees, what does Wejo do to predict future trends? That definitely sounds like a data science question, Dan.
Yeah, so at its heart, our data can be characterized as time series. So if you've ever worked in whether it's data science or any sort of analytics, time series gives you quite a good basis to start your prediction. So in terms of predicting, I mean, I'm talking about the short-term trends here. In terms of predicting, is it going to be congested in downtown San Francisco tomorrow? Well, we've got those models using fairly standard time series forecasting predictive models. In terms of forecasting future trends, now that's something that we're engaged with at a very high level, not just looking at what's happening on the roads, but what's happening in society as a whole. And I think this is because we've got a very good relationship with the OEMs in their strategy teams, and I think I'm going to hand back over to Joe because I know this is an area that he's very, very intrinsically linked to. But because we're able to talk to not just the OEMs, but some really big names who use big data, but also we're kind of in the middle of the whole conversation. We were at the Move America conference, the discussions there, which I was a part of and the team were a part of, connected vehicle data is right in the middle of those. So what that gives us is a unique sight on, not just people who can use it, people who want to use it, people who provide it. And in terms of, the long-term trends, well, I think I'll pass over to Joe in terms of what he thinks, but the shift after COVID to commuting, we're pretty sure that's likely to stay now. But actually the shift we're seeing in terms of electric vehicles, almost because of that, because the way that people are using the vehicles is changing, the way that, journeys are reducing, but actually the number of journeys is staying the same, but the length of the average journey is actually changing. These are trends that we see in, not just in connected vehicles, but in society. And I don't know if you've got anything you want to add there in probably, the more visionary view that we're looking at in Wejo, Joe.
Yeah, I would just I'd probably speak to a just a specific use case in terms of future predictions. We talk a lot about vehicle diagnostics, and when you take your vehicle in, if you're having some sort of a problem, to a repair center, whether that's the dealer network repair center or an independent, they want to diagnose the problem the first time and understand what needs to be repaired so that they can get you back on the road without need for further attention. Diagnostics is evolving into prognostics in the vehicle repair center or segment. And by looking at the time before and after a problem occurred, looking at the data that is associated with the repair, what parts were replaced, what was the failure, and looking at the signals and sensors from the vehicle sort of before and during the problem occurring, we can develop predictive models to say that a vehicle driving under these circumstances, perhaps in a certain geographic area, if it's something that's subject to, triggered by heat or cold, and then seeing the sensor behavior and the vehicle data bus information before the problem occurred, we can help the OEMs to predict when that might occur or it has the potential to occur on another customer's vehicle, and help them to not only design out those problems, but perhaps anticipate them and prevent somebody from ending up on the side of the road with a broken down vehicle. A couple more questions came in. Dan, what percentage of traffic volume do you capture in the United States on average?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it varies not just by geographical reason, but actually slightly by time of day. It's usually around 5 to 10% of traffic volumes, and we've validated that against a number of third-party sources. We've got some good ground truth data. We've worked with some toll companies to look at our coverage versus their coverage, and also we've had an independent assessment done by a major university who works in this space, and they've all validated that it's often around the 5%, 6%, sometimes a little bit lower, sometimes a little bit higher. But actually what we found from that, and this is the important thing, is what we've reached with our data, because it's a really high quality data source. We get the data, up to every second from the vehicles, but actually, we've got multi OEMs, we've got multi models, got multi years, we've got vehicles going back to 2014. We've got a really, really broad representation of the vehicles on the road. And what that means is we're going to hit statistical significance with the amount of data we've got in quite a huge amount of use cases. So, one of the university studies looked at, the traffic flows and the ebbs and flows on an hourly basis using our data and the side of road counts. And, it's able to predict the ebbs and flows. It really follows the traffic flows to a really, really high degree. So, we've got, as I said, I think it does vary from type of road, but usually around 5 to 10%. But actually that doesn't stop us being able to do some very detailed traffic modeling around, not just the average speed, but the safety impact of the roads. Is it led to a change in braking behavior because of some work zone that's been added in there and things. So yeah, it's and it's increasing as well. Looking at predicting the future, I think that we're looking at, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. Joe, do you know, is it 30% in the next 3 years that we think might be connected vehicle coverage, and it goes much higher than that in the 5-10 year projection.
Right. Yeah. The percentage. I mean, there's still a lot of older unconnected vehicles in the car park in the United States. I think the average age of a vehicle is more than 12 years old, and so there's lots of vehicles that are 20 years old still running around that may not have technology. But those vehicles are continuing to age off and continuing to be replaced by vehicles that are connected. The other thing is that we have that you gave an average number, and I think in certain areas, I think I've seen our number in like New York City or Manhattan as high, nearly 20% coverage, and so it does vary. But I think your key point is that statistically, you don't have to see the speed of every car on the road to know how the vehicles are traveling if you're seeing even 10% of the cars. Another question here from one of our attendees. Can third parties tap into the data or use any of the data links to take control of any of the car systems or features? The answer to that is no, absolutely not. Let me ask Dan to answer that in a technical way.
So first of all, Wejo is fully federated from the OEM, so it's it's a read only, so it's one-way traffic. So we receive traffic and data connection coming in. We certainly can't then go in there, but also it's the same on the OEM side as well. That this is very much data being sent. It's not a two-way connection. It's not vehicle control that the systems that we're talking about here. It's it's data being sent over usually 4G into various clouds, and I think Wejo and all of the OEMs, it's privacy and security is number one on here. And I'm sure there's wonderful videos on YouTube of someone putting a CD into a Mercedes. I think I once saw that caused the Mercedes to do something funny. I've never seen any of those validated, but they do make for interesting social media clips.
Right. Okay. We're coming up on the end of our hour. Just take a quick look back through. I think we've gotten all the questions that have submitted so far. And there was a question at the very beginning, will the slides be available to download? Not the slides specifically to download, but you'll be able to see all the slides because we will make a recording of this webinar available. Okay, going to have a last call for questions. Give everyone one more minute to type something into the chat or to the Q&A box. There was one person wrote in that just in relation to the discussion we had about the size of the connected vehicle car park, the latest estimate is that the connected vehicle volume worldwide is going to be 800 million units by 2030. So if you consider, worldwide on a global basis, there's about 100 million cars manufactured, and the vehicle car park average age is about 12 years. That says in 8 to 10 more years, which gets us up to about 2030, we will have moved most of those unconnected vehicles out of the car park, and we'll have almost all vehicles in the space will be connected to one degree or another. Will Wejo expand to Europe and Asia soon? Yes, absolutely. So we're already live with partners in Asia, and offering the same kinds of products that we do here that we began offering in the United States a couple of years ago. And we have partnership discussions with every major OEM around the world in every market. So Wejo is absolutely a global solution, and we will have data available from OEMs operating vehicles and connected vehicle programs in every region. In reality, much of the consumption of the data and the data usage tends to be local. So yeah, the people in Europe who design roads and manage traffic and provide driver services are interested in vehicles in Europe. But it still will have the ability to compare behavior region to region within a vehicle brand or across vehicle brands. So since we got one in that last minute, I'll give it one more minute just to make sure that we don't have anything go unanswered. I'll use the time to put a commercial in to say, depending on where you heard about our webinar today, stay tuned to that channel, follow us on LinkedIn, and we provide a lot of information, not only about when these webinars are going to be scheduled, and each one is slightly different. We try to focus in on new and different subjects each time, but we also share a lot of interesting information, use cases, white papers and studies through all of our social media channels. So feel free to look at that, as well as checking out wejo.com. Okay, well, Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, answering questions, and enlightening us all just a little bit more on big data and big mobility data in the world of mobility intelligence. Thank you to everybody, and we're going to close the webinar there. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.